Hey, this is Ike, and I'm here with the gang, and we're going to talk about R for data analytics. This is our third meeting, and we're going uh-oh. So, yep, share my entire screen. Okay. And then let's just see if here, can you guys see my screen? And can you hear me okay? You can type in that chat window over on the right. You can. Oh, you're on the, oh, nice. It's working great. Okay, Ben says it's working great. All right. So we started this. This is the data wrangling section, and that was going to start on about page 116. But before we do that, I wanted to tell you guys just a really quick story. I was telling Greg this a second ago. So my wife is defending her doctorate tomorrow, her dissertation tomorrow. And her doctorate is in public health. She is a specialist in HIV. In fact, she goes to Africa about 7 times a year, helping with the HIV epidemic in several African countries. In fact, on Saturday, she leaves for the Congo. And so her doctorate is also in public health. In fact, her dissertation is titled HIV Prevalence and Causal Behavior in the Military of Togo, which is a West African country right next to Ghana and Sierra Leone, those places. So she had a data set where a certain percentage of the Togo military answered questions about their behavior, and we knew their HIV prevalence, whether they were HIV positive or HIV negative. And we also knew whether they knew they were HIV positive or HIV negative. So there were some people who knew they were positive and they were positive. There were some people who did not know they were positive and they were positive. And interestingly enough, there were some people who knew they were positive and they were not positive. So there were a small subset there. And they knew whether or not these people did things. And I don't mean to, I know that sexual behavior and sexually transmitted diseases is a sensitive topic with maybe some people listening, but they also knew whether they used condoms or whether they had multiple sexual partners or whether they had men were having sex with men or women having sex with women. Like they knew these kind of behaviors and their drug use or non-drug use. So they wanted to see, was there anything abnormal about their behavior with their positive state? And so she wanted to do a lot of analysis with the variables in this data set. So they took a major percentage of the Togo military and they asked them, 100 questions, right, to determine if some of their behavior was leading to them being HIV positive. So she took, this data set was in SAS, and I don't know SAS. I mean, I'm doing R just like you guys are doing R. And so SAS sounded pretty daunting and sophisticated to me. So when she asked for my help, I'm just like, let me get a friend. So I go get a buddy who is a statistician, but he was just really busy with other projects. So she was frustrated because we just couldn't find help, and we looked. And so finally, Scott and I decided that we would have a crack at it. So because we don't know SAS and we weren't willing to learn, we took the SAS data set and we exported it to R. We actually first exported the SAS data set to CSV, and then once it was in CSV, we imported it into R using tidyverse, what we've been learning in our book reading, right? So after that, some Googling online, and Margot wanted to do 2 different types of testing. She wanted to do chi-square testing and Fisher testing. And I knew enough about stats to know that that was probably doable. But what we did was, now you've been learning this, right? We imported into CSV. We had a data frame. The Fisher tests won't take a data frame. They'll take a table. So we just did an as table, just like Tibble, like we've been learning in Tidyverse. We did an as table and extracted the columns that we wanted, created the table, fed it into the chi-square test, and got a p-score out, which told us whether those 2 variables that we were studying were dependent on one another or independent, right? So we did that about 60 times, and we got the results that she wanted. And if you would like to know the results about HIV behavior and prevalence in Togo, her dissertation defense is open to the public actually tomorrow. So anybody can go and kind of see that. But she's excited. Hopefully it goes well, right? Now, here, I think it's going to go well. She's really upset and really nervous. I think it's going to go well tomorrow because apparently, if your advisor says that you're ready to defend and you defend and do poorly, it looks badly on your advisor, right. not really on you, right? So, you know, at the point the advisor says you're ready to defend, it's probably going to be hard, but she's probably going to succeed. I mean, almost everybody kind of succeeds at that point. I guess I'm not supposed to say that, but so anyway, the moral of the story is I've been using what we've been learning in R and doing real science, like real fun stuff. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm going to win the Nobel Prize or anything, but it was cool to be able to help. And, you know, I think maybe we're actually getting to the point where we're getting useful in this stuff. And that's kind of exciting to me.
Interesting discoveries in the data that you were looking through?
Well, yeah, there are. Okay, here's an interesting discovery. And I have to be a little bit careful because they're still getting permission from the Togo military to go public. So I have to be cautious. But I think one thing I can say that's going to be public tomorrow anyway, is that the HIV rate in Togo is actually not very high as compared to other African countries where it's significant, right? Maybe 25% of the population might have HIV in some countries. In Togo, it's more close to the United States' level, maybe higher, but not an epidemic, right? But very few militaries, if any, militaries in the world will allow you to join if you're HIV positive. And Togo is no different. So when you go to join the military in Togo, they screen you for HIV. And if you're positive, they say, sorry, go find a different job, not this job, right? So if all of these 18-year-olds who are getting inducted to the military are negative, 6 years in, their HIV rates double society, right? Double it. And in Togo, HIV is primarily a female issue. Females have it far more than males do. In the military, males have it at twice the rate as females, right? Or more. It might be significantly more than that now that I think about it. But anyway, so the question that Margot's answering is, why is that? And we can't draw any firm conclusions. You learn in statistics about a null hypothesis. We can definitively rule out the negative behavior, like that behavior didn't lead to it, right? But what bears more study is it looks like older men are more prone to it. And it looks like something is happening around 4 or 5 years in, right? So longevity, and staying in for a little bit longer seems to correlate with a higher HIV rate. And finally, it looks like they, not surprisingly, are getting it when they're deployed.
Interesting.
So not when they're at home,
right,
around their mom, right, or whatever, their girlfriend or wife or whatever, right? But anyway, there you go. Okay, so I thought you guys would enjoy that few-minute story. And now let's talk about the book. So we were going to do part 2, and we're going to talk about wrangling. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I found this part really easy, much easier than the visualization part. And it might be because professionally I'm a business intelligence consultant and I do a lot of work with data. And so learning about things like filtering and joining and cleaning data all day, wrangling data all day, like that's my job. So like these terrible data sets that he shows really early on, I mean, I've seen every version of terrible data set, you know, and then had to clean it up. So, so there was nothing here where I was like, oh, that's crazy. But here's one thing I will say about R, and it's the first time I've ever said it about any other language. It cleans data better than SQL does. And in large part, it does that because it's really easy for them to build a package, and it's natural for them to build a package and import the package. And SQL, we don't have a culture of doing that, of like, because SQL is largely procedural, you bring in procedures one at a time, right? And that's no way to do anything advanced, right? And because SQL doesn't have arrays or structs, or it doesn't do looping really well, it doesn't have any type of link logic really well, it's cumbersome to do some of the things that R does naturally. And I'll get to that as we go kind of further down into the reading. I'll show you like, man, I would love to be able to do that in SQL. And now I understand like R is in SQL Server, and I think it's heading into Postgres. So I think having that as a language to clean data is pretty interesting.
So is the idea in SQL Server that you could use R to wrangle the data, but then SQL to do querying on the results of that?
Yes, that's
So it'll come out in a format.
Yeah, that's one idea. The other idea is that you would use R to train analytical models and have the analytical models close to the data, so you're not dragging the data over the network to do it and then putting it back. So yeah. Okay. All right. So did you guys finish the reading?
Mostly.
That's good. An extra month.
Yeah, next month. I know. Yeah.
I didn't get through the string chapter yet.
Yeah, the string chapter. Well, I mean, I don't know how much you love regex, but so let's talk about tibbles. So I didn't know anything about a tibble until I read the chapter. So I had never used one. And it was convincing. I was like, yep, I'll only use this. This seems pretty good. Like there were a lot of things that I really liked about it. One of the first things that he shows is the serialization. Like if you want to show a tibble, it shows the data type of every column and a sampling of the records. And I'm like, yep, that's way better than a data frame already, where you're just guessing what the data type is, or you have to do something else. And then data frame.
And then it restricts the results to, like it only shows you the first sampling of data.
Yeah, right.
Well, I mean, like there's a feature in R, right? Where if you have two columns and one of them is called, I don't know, like key and the other is called value, right? You could use KEY, you can use KE, you can use K, and it's like, well, that's unique, so that's close enough. I'll just grab that column. Like, totally not a useful feature for like writing bug-free code, right?
Yeah, it's like
you should
worse
name it
than
the way it's named. Don't use matching.
Don't be so forgiving that all my bugs are buried.
Yes.
You know, like the bug surfacing is like ideally the bug, it shouldn't even run. It should just like immediately like air out and say, you're doing shit you shouldn't be doing.
Right. So I'm saying, so tools like not supporting some of that stuff is like, oh, that's good actually. It forces clean code.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, that's good. And then I don't know, like what was the other difference that he said from Tibble and data frame that caught me? I don't know. It'll come to me.
Some differences with type conversions.
Yeah, that was a big difference. Is in strings, it uses placeholders. It basically uses an enum for strings in a data frame. So the data frame will take a string and give it a different value underneath, right? I'm not sure why it does that, why it factors strings like it does. I'm not sure what the original purpose of that is, but a Tibble doesn't do that.
Well, sometimes it is convenient, but like you can just explicitly say it's factor. So then.
Oh, you can force, even in the Tibble, you can force it to factor.
You can create factors in a Tibble. And
yeah.
It's, I was actually just, the other day I was doing a chart and I had 2 years only, 2016 and 2017. And like the chart wanted to treat it as a continuous variable. And it had like, like the y-axis was like 215.5, 216, 216.5. And I'm like, no, could you just like not do that? And I ended up just changing it to a factor.
Yeah, and immediately it knows it's discrete.
Like, oh, okay, now it does. But I was like,
yeah,
really?
Yeah.
It's actually kind of annoying. So I could see like sometimes you're like, oh, it did that behind the scenes, and actually I'm happy.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. What do you do for work?
So I'm in healthcare, but we call people about appointments, and so actually I've worked on some of the data around what we call people. Do they say yes? Do they say no? Stuff like that.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So.
Can you relate it to what the appointment is about, to the coded appointment? Like if you're calling them to schedule healthcare appointments, right? If they have a particular issue, are they more likely?
Well, so that's where we're trying to get to. We're just really at the basics right now. Like if I call you, should I wait a day, 2 days, 3 days before I call again? Like, does it make a difference? Like if I pester you too much, are you more likely to say no? That kind of thing. And then, yes, ultimately, right, marketing, they want to A/B test different scripts and different messaging. Like that.
I can tell you how I do my accounts payable, my accounts receivable when I try to get my customers to pay. Here's what I've learned to do when I call and I say, hey, I've noticed, we might be a little late on a payment. And they'll say, oh, yeah, I'll get that out to you. And I said, great, I'm glad to hear it. What day should I wait till before I call you back? Like that one question of like, and any number I'll say yes to, right? If they say by next Monday, okay, by 10 days, okay, whatever, any day. And I just put it on my calendar, call them back. But then I keep my commitment, right? Whatever they said, I call that day and say, hey, what was going on there, right? Oh yeah, we'll get that right out. Okay, what day should I call you back if you don't do that yet? I don't know. People want to keep their commitments, I have found. So they're not purposely duplicitous, right? I don't think they are. Most aren't. So, okay. That's interesting. So you're running and you're doing most of the analysis in R?
I was trying to practice my R. So actually there's 3 of us sitting in a room pouring over some data, right? So one guy's writing queries. One of us was putting it in and he was slapping some stuff in Excel. Other person was putting stuff in Tableau, and I was trying to practice my like ggplot stuff. And most of the time they were getting the stuff faster than me, and I was cursing because of things like, continuous years, and I just wanted like a different color for 16 and 17. Instead, it was like doing shades of blue, and I'm like, how do I change the color on this? And, just like the newbie learning curve stuff.
Well, that's interesting that you say that, because I think for the like Tableau Make sure. Yeti. So it says it should be working. I'm not sure why it wouldn't.
The little microphone had a line through it up here. Is it just
Pause it, and then that's to go.
Oh,
All right. We're just resetting it, I guess. Sorry, we didn't catch that.
Yeah.
Audio is working. Great, Steve. I apologize for that. I hope you didn't miss too much. Okay. Okay, yeah, you bet. Okay, so I was saying we're not going to go through all the exercises right now, but were there any exercises that you guys wanted to particularly talk about? And did you want to mention anything else about Tibbles that you thought were cool?
Remember anything?
Okay, so the next chapter 8 is importing with Reader. And I always wonder, like, am I saying this correctly? Because I don't ever hear anybody say Reader.
Right.
I just know what it says in my head.
Uh-huh.
It was like the first time I read Harry Potter, and then when I saw the movie, I'm like, oh, it's Hermione,
Uh-huh.
not Hermione.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I made that mistake in a meeting the other day because I was in a Power BI meeting, and the guy said something about R and how he wanted to do something in Power BI that was similar to Dippler. But he said Depplier. And I was like, oh, it's Depplier. It's not Dippler. Oh, got it. Yeah. Then I have to like catch myself every time. Depplier. Yeah. Because in my head, I said Dippler like 500 times read this book. Anyway, so we learn a little bit about Reader, and we learned that you can use Reader to read CSV, read CSV2, read TSV, read DLIM, read FWF, which is fixed width files. And what was funny about that is I actually, when I was doing that project with my wife, I used read CSV to get that SAS data from the SAS file into, I thought I was doing something right by putting it into a data frame, but it turns out most of the testing that you would use, they can't use data frames. So they required a table. And I wondered, like, oh, could I just have used read CSV to put it right into a table? And I just didn't know it, but I didn't see an option for how to do that. And then read log to read Apache web logs. And they're all pretty easy. I mean, read CSV takes a comma delimited file. You get quoted identifiers just like you would think you would. You get to skip the header row if you want to skip the header row. Like, everything behaves kind of the way I assumed it would behave. And then I don't know if you guys, I don't know if you guys saw something that was really, really interesting.
Not super interesting, but just one comment for me is we get a lot of fixed width files from Medicare.
Yeah.
And so to follow up on your package comment, right? So if you're going to write a package that can support fixed width files, it's really nice that they give all 3 options, like the option where you specify the width of each of the fixed width things, or the starting position of each thing, or I don't even remember what it was, but like, because then it's like, yes, you could easily do the math and convert one to the other, but if you have like a PDF and it just has like column numbers, or sometimes you don't, you just get widths, then it's like a pain to have to like convert one to the other.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I don't even have to do that. There's a different version of the helper function that just takes it the way I already have it.
Yeah, even better is when the vendor who gives you the fixed width file gives you the document and tells you, here's what's going to be in there. And I'm like, oh my God, they're professionals. And I wonder if they could give you like the R, like, you know.
But that's the thing is, ultimately, I don't even need the R. I just need like a comma separated list of either widths or starting column numbers.
Oh, right.
If you
Right.
have that, that's like 95% of the work of specifying the parameters.
Yeah.
To load it up,
Yeah.
right?
Good point.
So, but it's very annoying if like your program wants like the width of each column but what you have is the starting position of each one. So then you're like, okay, easily do it just by doing subtraction, but like.
What if I screw that up? You know, you're likely to subtraction over 50 columns that are self-referencing each other. You know, you're likely to miss one, you know.
So I was just thinking like, okay, but this is where the package concept shines, because maybe they didn't originally have all three, but at some point somebody was like, you know, well, it'd make life easier.
Yeah.
You know, so then version 1.1, it's like, okay, we added another way.
Yeah, that is awesome. And ours whole attitude of being open source, and he says the audio stopped again. I don't see why it would keep doing that. I mean, it says it's there. So if and move it again. That's crazy. So one thing I've learned is to have okay, it says it's working. Hopefully that's good. I lost my train of thought. I feel like I have to keep that little bar on now just so I can see it. Okay. No, they are kind of community where like they hit a problem and they just package it up and make it publishable is very warm and fuzzy. It's very nice that they do that. And their package management is great. Like, yeah, it's the only thing I don't like about it is that there are so many ways to do one thing that when you Google what you want to do, you literally get 20 responses and none of them resemble each other. Yeah. So they're like vastly different. And I'm like, I don't have time to go figure out what's the difference between these 20 answers. So I'll just pick the first one that works. But I wonder if, you know, Google's very good at certain things, but what it's not good at is doing relevance over time. So like if the first answer of Google was really, really great in 2009 and people keep clicking on it, it'll be really great in 2018, right? But if in 2015, the R community at our user groups decided to do it differently, that might get buried. And I might not know that till 2020, right? So
sort of by virtue of it being the first link, when everyone keeps clicking on it, it persists.
Yeah, it's
self-perpetuating.
Yeah, it's so in things where I am an expert at, I'm an expert on very few things, but those few things I speak around the world on, right? And so when I, you know, ask a question, right, and say, Google, tell me the answer, I'm like, oh my God, no! Like, there's much easier ways of doing it now. Like, you know, we shouldn't be teaching this old way that requires 50 lines of code when we have a new way that's much faster, right? And clearer. But yeah, Google's not, one day we'll have to have a search engine because things are changing so quickly that time relevance is like really, really important. Like particularly in the cloud and in R and in Azure and AWS, like I see old blog posts all the time with bad screenshots, bad. Okay.
Well, maybe if Big Brother's watching, they should develop an algorithm that sees whether or not you used that page or you like kept looking. It's like maybe if everyone keeps clicking the first link, like nah, and they go to the second link, then that's a sign that the first link wasn't so great.
Yeah, I think they do that.
Really?
Yeah, I think they do that. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Only if people are smart enough to figure out that the first link wasn't a good one.
Right. Right. Okay, so
I didn't actually dig into the other options of read CSV, but one thing I come across often is where the header isn't just a known set of a number of lines, but it's some variable number of things, and then it'll be a gap of no data, and then your data table is below it, or like in an Excel file or something, or you'll often get stuff at the top that you want to skip before you start processing. So I wonder if read CSV has because you can say skip a number of lines, but can you specify some sort of, how would you skip, dynamically determined number of lines?
Oh, dynamically determined number of lines.
I think you just have to do it by
Somebody
hand. So for example, if you're expecting a header line that's going to go patient ID, comma, first name, comma, last name, then you just basically say, look at the first 20 rows and find where is it.
Right.
And then you're like, oh, look, this month it's on row 6. So I'll tell it skip lines 5, Next month, who knows? Maybe it'll be on row 9 because they'll insert some more, gibberish.
Right.
Well, he says in the book that sometimes it's beneficial to just bring it in all as character.
Oh, right.
And then manipulate it programmatically after its character and then make it strongly typed, the correct data types,
right.
Which is like, I have to do that all the time, constantly, bring it in as whatever the most forgiving thing is so that then I can get a handle on what's in there. Yeah.
Right. I do that with those darn fixed with files sometimes. Like, I'll just bring it in as a 300 character string and then I'll split it once I have it in one column as a 300 character.
Yeah.
Especially when people don't have just a fixed width format, but they say, right, like the first character indicates whether this is an A record, a B record, or a C record.
Yeah,
completely different widths. And you're like, there's a way I can do this, but it's actually much easier just to load everything and then SQL say if left 1 equals A, if left 1 equals B.
Yeah. One thing that R was very forgiving about in reading this is they were very good at ragged write files where not all the columns are given values. If you have 16 values and it gets to column 12 and realizes the rest are null, it just doesn't comment limit empty. It just like stops. And a lot of older systems like IBM DB2, when they output, they love outputting ragged write files. And so R just is like, oh yeah, that's just empty, no problem, right? And if you tell R, hey, when you see empty, can you put NA there? Sure, done. Right. You're like, wow, that is. When I got to that part, I was like, oh, that is very, very nice. It was very, very nice to the developer.
Or you could put whatever you want, right?
Yeah.
Or you could say whatever, right? What should NA
be
corresponding to?
Yeah. That part was pretty good. So I like that they said that the tidyverse versions of read CSV were 10 times faster than their base equivalents. Yeah. That's good to know. I'll just take their word for it because I'm not going to do any speed tests, but yeah. They produce tibbles instead of converting vectors to factors, which I thought was pretty good. And they're more reproducible. Base R functions inherit some behavior from the OS and environment variables, which anybody who's done anything with date formatting in languages that start picking up environment variables and not tell you, that's pretty like, oh, it worked on my machine, but when I sent it to my buddy in England, everything went to shit, right? Yeah, yeah.
Days and months get switched.
Yeah.
Are tibbles a real thing outside of R? Is there a statistical concept called?
No, not that. Well, okay, I'm not. What I've heard is that in order to really understand statistics, you need to have a master's degree in statistics. And I've only taken one stats class. So in my one stats class, no, it's not a real thing. But who knows? But
I think it's unique to R.
Yeah, unique to R, yeah.
And the fact that R's, I don't know exactly how old, but very old. So kind of a way of bringing it forward.
Yeah. Yep. So, and then here on page 130 is the first word for deployer. Still not natural to say that.
What is, I get reader,
So
The
deployer
derivation
is
of the
used,
word.
like here they're using it to parse numbers, to
Right.
change columns, to just manipulate the data, and like it almost like an ETL package would.
Right.
Didn't
But why the
last
name
session, didn't somebody
Like
say
manipulating it like it's a
where
tool.
where the word came from? Like,
Deployer. That's funny.
Oh yeah, I don't
there was
know.
like a comment last session.
I don't know. That's a good question. Why
Yeah.
deployer? Deployer is a new package, blah, 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 blah,
Oh, but it doesn't say
for
what
data
the name-
manipulation. Yeah,
What, like the etymology.
Yeah, that's what.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I would definitely Google that, but I don't know how to spell etymology.
Somebody said about
Google will tell me.
how to apply something.
I don't know. Googling things while streaming is always dangerous. Who knows what's going to come up?
Maybe that's why your microphone.
Yeah. I mean, we should probably check in with him and see if audio is working. Audio stopped. Okay, well, I think it's still working. All right. Okay, so learned about deployer. What else do we want to talk about? Yeah, reader using UTF-8 everywhere is very nice. That, you know, no matter what happens, reader's going to output UTF-8. That sounds pretty great. It assumes your data is UTF-8 encoded when you read it, and it always uses it when writing. Now, if we can just get everybody to do that. And then we already talked about factors. And then, yeah, R doing its unique date time is fine. You know, one thing I do like about tidyverse is the consistency, which is like when reader uses date time, it uses it this way. When deployer uses it, it uses it the same way. Like every single little sub package is consistent. That's really nice. Okay, so I'm not sure. You guys have to stop me when there's something about, you know, something you want to cover. But on this page 138, I did like this. So the defaults, sometimes they don't always work. Like the first 1,000 rows might be a special case and reader guesses a type, but that's not correct. That's a really common thing for ETL tools to do because they're not going to read a gig file. They're just going to like take a quick sample and then tell you what they think the type is. So the column might contain a lot of missing values. If the first 1,000 rows contain only NAs, reader will guess that it's a character vector when in reality there might be some number buried down there. Yep, that happens everywhere. So
I actually liked Hadley's recommendation that go ahead and use its auto guess feature and whatever, and then once you've proven to yourself that it's right, then make them all explicit so that no matter how the first 1,000 rows changes in the future, it'll always use those data types. Right, so use the convenience, but
then switch to explicit.
Production-y type code, just always explicitly state.
Because it'll spit it out for you, even the columns,
such that you can then just
yeah.
paste it back into your.
Right. Right. Yeah, and one thing that R does really well that SQL doesn't do is it tells you what column was the problem and how far down. And SQL sometimes isn't super specific about where the problem was and how far down to go find it. Like, because SQL deals in sets. R is reading things sequentially. SQL is row number is irrelevant to SQL. In a set, there's no ordering. So, yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, where was it? There was, oh yeah, problems. Yeah, you can actually call the problems method and it'll tell you exactly what the problems are.
Yeah. Yeah, that is cool. Yep. Yep. Yeah, I highly recommend always supplying the call types, building up from the printout provided by reader. This ensures that you have a consistent and reproducible data import script. If you rely on the default guesses and your data changes, reader will continue to read it in. If you want to be really strict, use stop for problems. That will throw an error and stop your script if it has any parsing problems. So yeah, that is good. That's what you're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
I have a syntax question.
And this is what I said earlier, which is sometimes it's easier to diagnose problems if you read in all the columns as character vectors and then, iterate over it. Yeah. Yeah, let's hear it.
I have a syntax question. I'm trying to wrap my head around when something is just like right there in the middle of the left column, dot default. I see things like that, dot, and then I see other cases where it's dot, dot, word, dot, dot. I haven't made sense of those two syntaxes yet.
See, this is where I think